What would you think if I told you that the woman you can't forget is not just a memory, but a mirror? Years have passed. The world has changed. You've changed, or so you say. New faces, new places, 1,000 distractions piled like scaffolding around your life. But still, there are moments. Quiet ones, late ones between words or beneath noise, where her image reemerges like smoke, uninvited, unexplainable, but undeniable. You remember how she looked when she wasn't looking at you, how she spoke with a calm you didn't understand, how she walked away, not with rage, but with a kind of sacred silence that made your soul ache louder than any argument could. And now, years later, the ghost of her lingers, not just in memory, but in meaning. Carl Jung understood this well. He knew that people do not haunt us by accident. They represent pieces of ourselves we have not integrated. And so when you think of her, you are not just remembering her. You are being confronted by the parts of you she awakened, challenged, or exposed, and the parts you still refuse to see. This is shadow work, not a trend, not a slogan, but the raw, bloody task of dragging the unconscious into the light. The woman you still think about, she wasn't perfect. She wasn't magic, but she touched a place in you that was never safe before. A place where your boyhood fears and manhood ideals collided in a storm you couldn't name. She didn't just enter your life, she disrupted your identity. And the truth you may not want to face is this: it was never really about her. It was about who you were in her presence. Or more precisely, who you could have been, but weren't ready to become. Jung taught that the anima, the feminine within the male psyche, is projected outward, often onto the women a man desires most intensely. She becomes the vessel of his soul's longing, the muse of his unformed potential, the embodiment of everything he's forgotten how to feel. She carries the weight of his fantasies and the burden of his denial. And when she walks away, that illusion shatters. She didn't betray you. She revealed you. You see, the mind tries to forget what the soul refuses to release. Not because of attachment, but because of unfinished alchemy. That woman you still think about, she was a catalyst, a sacred interruption. Her presence forced you to confront the parts of yourself you keep hidden behind performance, distraction, or pride. And maybe you weren't ready. Maybe you ran. Or maybe you stayed, but you stayed armored. You didn't listen. You corrected. You needed to be right more than you needed to be whole. And she saw that. Not with judgment, but with clarity. And her silence was not abandonment. It was an offering, an invitation to meet yourself. But you mistook it for punishment. Because we are not taught to see feminine departure as wisdom. We are taught to see it as loss. So now, you remember her when the world gets quiet. Not because you missed the relationship, but because you missed the reflection. The version of you that only appeared in the light she held up. And deep down, you wonder, could you ever meet her again? Not to reclaim her, but to reclaim yourself? This is the quiet torment of shadow projection. We chase the external form of what we've lost internally. And in doing so, we avoid the very wound that could set us free. But wounds ignored become obsessions. Emotions denied become ghosts. So when she flashes through your mind in the silence between lovers, in the hollowness behind success, in the moments where you should feel whole but don't, it's not a sign that you need her. It's a sign that you need to go where she once tried to take you, deeper. Because the feminine doesn't stay where the soul is silenced. She doesn't linger where she's only half seen, half heard, half honored. She leaves not to teach you a lesson, but to protect her own becoming. And if you're still thinking about her years later, maybe it's because part of you still hasn't caught up with the man you could have been in her presence. The question is not why she left. The question is, why did you abandon the part of yourself that showed up when she was near? The most dangerous woman to a man's ego is the one who doesn't need to be remembered, because she already became unforgettable. Not because of her body, not because of her words, but because of what she revealed, what she stirred in the deepest, most hidden corners of his unconscious. That part you didn't even know existed until she looked at you, not with lust, but with truth. There is something haunting about a woman who doesn't chase closure, who doesn't explain why she left, who simply disappears with grace, carrying with her the mirror you once looked into to feel whole. That silence, it's not emptiness. It's a spiritual echo chamber that reverberates through everything you built on a shaky foundation of ego and illusion. Carl Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we exile, our shadows, don't die. They wait. They live in the people we are drawn to, in the ones we lose, and most powerfully, in the ones we never stop thinking about. So what is it that still binds you to her memory, even after all this time? It's not that she was flawless. It's that she exposed your fault lines. She asked questions you couldn't answer. She wanted presence when you offered performance. She required truth where you gave distraction. And you knew, on some deep, primal level, that she saw through you. Not in judgment, in invitation. To meet her soul, you had to meet your own. But ego doesn't bow easily. It resists the invitation with denial. It chooses comfort over awakening. And when she walked away, not to punish you, but to preserve her own evolution, it shattered the illusion that love could survive where there is no self-awareness. Still, your body remembers her. Not just her touch, but the silence she left behind. A silence you now recognize as sacred, because nothing has echoed louder than her absence. Every relationship since her has been a comparison you pretend not to make. Every conversation lacks a depth you once took for granted. Every kiss feels like pretending you forgot something you never truly let go of. Why? Because she wasn't just a woman. She was an archetype. She was the anima. In Jungian terms, the anima is the man's internal feminine, the soul's emotional compass, the muse, the force of connection and depth. When undeveloped, this part of the male psyche gets projected onto women who embody what the man lacks in himself. But once the projection collapses, once she's gone, the man is left with the unbearable task of reclaiming that part within himself. That's why she still lingers in your mind. Not because you didn't move on, but because you haven't moved inward. You chased success, stability, other lovers. But you never went back into the wound she touched. You never faced the hollow ache she revealed when she refused to play small for your comfort. You never answered the deeper question her departure raised. Who are you when no woman is there to reflect your worth back to you? The truth is, she didn't break you. She unmasked you. And that is why her image returns, not as torment, but as opportunity. To stop looking outward. To stop chasing her ghost. To stop replaying old conversations and fantasizing about second chances. This isn't about her anymore. It's about the part of you she introduced you to, the one you abandoned the moment she did. Men often confuse heartbreak with love, but the heartbreak you feel is not about losing her. It's about losing the man you could have become if you'd chosen evolution over ego. And the longer you run from that truth, the louder her silence becomes. So you ask why you still think about her, years later. The answer? Because she awakened a part of you that's still asleep. Because her presence cracked the armor you've tried to rebuild. Because her absence is not a wound, it's a compass. And if you ever find the courage to follow where it points, you'll see she was never the destination. She was the door. That's all she ever was. A threshold to a version of yourself you hadn't yet met. And now, years later, you still stand there. One foot in the life you've carefully constructed, ordered, logical, predictable. The other hovering just beyond the unknown. The chaos. The truth. The place where your soul doesn't lie flat and silent, but roars for integration. Because what if she wasn't just a memory, but a metaphor? What if she was your soul trying to speak, and you silenced it? You see, the woman you still think about was never meant to stay. Her purpose was to disturb you, not in a petty or cruel way, but in the sacred way all true catalysts do. Her exit wasn't punishment, it was prophecy. Her absence was not the end, it was a summons. She forced you to feel things you had buried under masculine conditioning. Vulnerability, surrender, tenderness that had no script. She looked at you not as a man performing masculinity, but as a soul hiding behind it. And that's the gaze that undoes men, not with violence, but with recognition. And you couldn't meet her there, not because you didn't want to, but because the part of you capable of meeting her had never been given oxygen. It had lived too long in the dark corners of your psyche, where softness was weakness and love was transaction. You couldn't hold her because you had never learned to hold yourself. So you let her go. Or maybe she let herself go. And now you remember her, not because she was perfect, but because she shattered the illusion that you were. You can try to forget. You can keep collecting people, experiences, accolades, layering them like bricks in the wall that keeps her ghost at bay. But you will always find her in the quiet, in the stillness, in the absence of distraction, when you're face to face with your own reflection and it's not enough. That's where she lives. Not in your heart, but in your shadow. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And so here you are, calling her fate, believing some cosmic mistake separated you, or that the timing was wrong, or that if you'd only said more, done more, fought harder. But none of that would have mattered, because you didn't lose her. You lost access to the part of yourself she was trying to call forth. And this is why you still think about her. Because your work is not finished. Not with her. With you. You still have not faced the part of yourself she saw so clearly. The boy still seeking approval. The man still avoiding his truth. The lover still afraid to feel too deeply, lest he become dependent on love to define his identity. She didn't want to be your savior. She wanted to be your mirror. But you mistook the reflection for the source. You made her responsible for your light and blamed her for your darkness. And she walked away, not to disappear from your life, but to disappear from your illusion. That's why no one since her has felt real. Because you've been relating from a mask, and she tore it off once. You haven't let anyone get close enough to do it again. Not because you can't, because you won't. You fear what it would mean to be seen that fully again. You fear what it would cost. But here's the truth. The cost of staying asleep is always greater than the pain of waking up. And she was your alarm. She was the dream that showed you were dreaming. She was the disruption that begged for your transformation. You can keep thinking about her, or you can become the man she saw. You can keep chasing her ghost, or you can resurrect your soul. But you cannot do both. Because the woman you still think about wasn't the destination. She was the fire. And fire does not comfort. It purifies. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. And she became the echo you can't outrun. Not because she hurt you, but because she unveiled you. You didn't lose a woman. You lost the story you told yourself about who you were. And that loss, unspoken, ungrieved, is the reason her silence still follows you. Carl Jung spoke of the soul as a hidden thing, often projected outward when one is not yet whole. And in that projection, love becomes a mirror, not a meeting. You didn't fall in love with her, not entirely. You fell in love with the version of you that she unearthed. The one that could finally breathe in her presence. The one that felt seen without explanation. She cracked your ego not with words, but with energy, with presence, with the kind of calm only a woman who has faced herself can embody. And you were drawn to it, magnetized by it, even as your unconscious fought to destroy it. Because the unhealed masculine doesn't know how to receive without control. And the moment she asked you to feel what you had always feared, to open where you'd only performed, you recoiled. Not because you didn't want love, but because you didn't trust it. Because deep down, you didn't trust yourself to be worthy of it. So now, years later, her image is a haunting, but it is also a map. She shows up not to torment you, but to summon you. To call you back into the terrain you've avoided, your unintegrated emotions, your hidden fears, your unmet grief, your unclaimed soul. The longer you avoid this, the longer she stays. And not as the woman herself, but as the ache, the emptiness, the invisible standard by which every other connection falls short. The lens through which intimacy becomes comparison instead of communion. Because when you haven't met yourself, you can't truly meet anyone else. And she met you, not the version you curated, but the essence that leaked through your cracks. She touched your chaos, not your confidence. And instead of trying to fix you, she simply saw you, fully. And in that moment, your soul stirred. It reached for her like it had been starving, not for her affection, but for recognition. But when the soul is not ready to receive its own reflection, it reacts with fear. You pushed her away. Or maybe you froze. Or maybe you played it cool, hoping she'd reach further, prove her love, fight for what you were too afraid to name. But she didn't. Because a woman who's met her own darkness doesn't argue with yours. She leaves it for you to face. And this is the gift. The haunting is the call. She comes to mind when you're alone, not because she is unfinished, but because you are. Because her energy activated something ancient and dormant in you. A knowing, a longing, a deeper life you glimpsed for one heartbeat and then lost in the noise of avoidance. But the soul never forgets what the mind tries to erase. And that is why her memory returns not as nostalgia, but as initiation. This is not about romantic closure. It is about psychic integration. You are being asked to go back, not to her, but to the point where you turned away from yourself. From depth, from presence, from vulnerability. from the path she represented, but could not walk for you. You still think about her because she awakened the man you're afraid to become. And the more you deny that man, the louder her name echoes in the silence. But here's the truth the ego resists most. She was never yours to possess. She was yours to transform through. And in that transformation, you meet not her again, but yourself. So are you ready? To stop reminiscing and start reclaiming? To let the pain mean something? To stop chasing her ghost and start embodying the man she glimpsed in your eyes before you saw him? Because the longer you delay this becoming, the more she lingers. Not to haunt, but to remind that the woman you can't forget didn't come to love you. She came to awaken you. You cannot outrun a soul that once cracked you open, not because it demands your return, but because it demands your evolution. That is why, after all this time, her presence still flickers behind your eyes when the world goes quiet. She is not holding on, you are. Not to her, but to the moment your illusion shattered and you glimpsed who you could be if you dared to shed the armor. The truth is, she was never yours to keep. She was yours to awaken through. An awakening is violent to the ego. In her silence, you encountered something no applause, no conquest, no affection could ever give you. A confrontation with your unlived truth. Carl Jung understood this sacred confrontation. He said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." She was your dream. But the dream ended not because she left, but because she finished her role. Her sole contract with you was not to stay, but to reveal. She didn't fail you. She freed you from illusion, from avoidance, from the man you thought you had to be in order to be loved. And that freedom came cloaked in grief. That grief became obsession. And obsession is the shadow's last attempt to make you look inward. You tried to rewrite her story through other women, hoping to replicate the fire without facing the flame. But you can't recreate what was never external to begin with. What you long for now is not her, but the lost parts of you she summoned. This is the path of individuation, the journey Jung called the process of becoming whole. And no one completes that path without dissent, without confrontation, without standing in the ashes of what the ego tried to protect and admitting, "This pain is mine." The woman you still think about was the catalyst. But the fire she lit, that's yours to carry. Not as torment, but as transmutation. The ache is not a curse. It is a compass. Her memory is a myth your psyche tells not to cling, but to compel. To return not to her, but to you. Not to the story of what could have been, but to the truth of what must now begin. Because the shadow is not evil. It is neglected. The parts of you she touched, the emotional honesty, the raw presence, the deep masculine vulnerability, are not weaknesses. They are doorways. And she pointed toward them without apology. But you had to choose to enter. And now, maybe you will. Because maybe you've lived enough lifetimes in one skin. Maybe you're tired of pretending, of avoiding the very work her absence screams for you to do, of denying the depth you know you're capable of. If only you'd stop waiting for permission to become it. The man you could have been for her? Become him for you. Not to win her back, but to never abandon yourself again. Let the silence you resented become the stillness you honor. Let the ache become the anchor. Let the ghost become the guide. Because once you do, something shifts. You stop chasing women to complete you. You stop fearing solitude. You stop bargaining with love. You stop performing. You begin to speak without defense, to feel without shame, to show up without needing to be saved, to love from fullness, not from fracture. And in that becoming, something beautiful happens. You release her, not because you forget her, but because you finally understand what she was. Not a wound, a mirror, not the end, the beginning. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.